This is a game called The Outer Worlds. Now again, I've just noticed that when I start recording the video with Bandicam, it's losing about 5 frames per second, so it's just touching under 30 frames per second, but I'm sure with some action that's going to go down quite a bit. I've got it on lowest graphical qualities and I've nudged the resolution scale down quite a lot because it's quite a recent game, so I need to give this machine as much help as possible, but it's at the moment it's fairly playable, to be honest. I'd say without Bandicam recording you're going to get 35 to 40 frames per second depending on what's going on. I mean, this is an outdoor area which always taxes most graphic cards anyway. So yeah, I suppose if you didn't have Bandicam recording, this is a pretty playable game, what I can see at the moment. Now, this is an RPG game called The Witcher 3, and it's at right at the start of the game, so there's not much going on, but it is an outdoor level. And again, all graphical quality settings are set to low, and once again the frame rate's gone down a little bit due to the Bandicam recording. So I suppose without that you're going to get, at the moment you get over 30 frames per second, which is more than playable. If there's some action going on, I suppose that's going to go down by a bit. But this is quite a good looking game. I think it's about 4 or 5 years old, but even on low quality settings at the moment it still looks good. Okay, so that's The Witcher 3. This is a free-to-play Apex Legends. Now I've noticed when I record using Bandicam in game mode, the frames per second counter would show in the top left, but the video wouldn't actually record. I think I've had this problem before, so I've put it into screen record mode and I can't see the frames per second, but we were getting, I'd say on average 50 frames per second with low quality settings, which for a fast-paced game like this is more than adequate. I suppose once you get outside it's going to dip slightly, but it didn't seem to dip slightly too much. So I say this machine can play this game quite happily. I haven't played this very much really. I've just used it, as with most of these games that you're seeing, I've used it as a benchmark. Okay, so that's Apex Legends, a game that's familiar to a lot of people. It's Fortnite. I've got it on low settings. The frame rate I've noticed does dip slightly. You know, I've started recording on Bandicam, but I think as long as you're getting 30 frames per second, that's fine on a fast-paced game. I'm sure the frame rate will dip again. Sounds like I'm repeating myself once there's a lot of firefighting going on, but I think if you can get 30 frames per second, you're fine. And this is an outdoor area, and this machine has no problems coping with that. I think you'll probably get mid-20s on average if you do up the quality slightly, but I prefer frames per second really. So yeah, if you can live with these quality settings at 30 frames per second on Fortnite, you're doing well. And this is FIFA 18, and again I noticed the frame rate just dips slightly when I started Bandicam. At the moment we're getting 60 frames per second. So this machine has no problems handling this. Fairly recent game actually. So yeah, if you like playing sports games, then it's not going to have any problem. I noticed the frame rate does dip to slight mid-40s when there's like a video cut scene of the players and maybe during the goal celebrations. But the gameplay is just 60 frames per second, no problem whatsoever. This is GTA 5, which is a relatively old game, but people still seem to play it. Low settings, yeah, no problems with this. I probably could up the quality settings actually on this game to get a better experience. But I prefer high quality high quality frame rates. You got me there. Okay, so that's GTA 5, no problems with this. This is player Unknown Battlegrounds. There's not a lot going on at the moment, but the frame counter I'm seeing on Bandicam is 60 frames per second. I'm sure with a lot going on, because that frame rate's going to drop a little bit. A lot of players can be in the same game, so I'm sure that 60 frames per second won't stay there for very long. But yeah, this game is more than playable on this machine. Okay, so that's PUBG. Now this is Far Cry 4. Now I don't think this game is going to play any of the Far Cry series later on, so I think Far Cry 4 is the limit. So we're just nudging 30 frames per second, which if it stays like that, it's more than playable. And it looks okay on the lowest quality setting. I suppose if you nudge the resolution down a bit, then you'll probably get more frames per second, but this is at the moment this is the highest resolution but the lowest graphical quality settings, so I'm sure you can experiment and get even more frames out of this. Okay, so that's Far Cry 4. This is Resident Evil 7. It's indoors at the moment, so frame rate's pretty solid, 60 frames per second. Now, because this is an exploration game, it's not too much of a problem if that frame rate dips. Outdoors, I'm sure it will slightly, but if most of, I think most of this game is quite slow paced, it'll probably dip down if there's any other characters moving around on the screen. But I'm sure it won't dip down too much. It's not really a game where there's going to be a lot of action on the screen as far as I'm aware. Now I think there's a couple of games later on in this series, but I thought I'd test this one out as it's a couple of years old and this machine might struggle on those later games, but you can be confident of any games before this, it's going to run fine. Right, so that's Resident Evil 7. This is Call of Duty Warzone multiplayer. At the moment we're getting 30 frames per second. Now I did get a VRAM warning message, obviously being a 1 gig graphics card, saying there wasn't enough VRAM. So I'm sure that those frames are going to drop a little bit when there's a lot going on. But at the moment, 30 frames per second is quite decent enough to play this. Now I'm not sure what's going to be like when there's a lot going on, but this outdoor area, now it's gone outside, it's like 20, 23 per second. Probably get 1 or 2 frames per second more if I stop recording with Bandicam, but 25 and above, that's fine on this game. Okay, so that's Call of Duty Warzone. This is in the Elder Scrolls series at Skyrim, Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, and we're getting 60 frames per second, which on an exploration game is just fine. There's a little bit going on in this opening scene. So there's quite a few effects here. But in an exploration game, 60 frames per second is more than adequate. Because it tends to be a bit slower paced. Okay, so that's the Elder Scrolls Skyrim. This is Battlefield 1. It's quite a comprehensive series. Now there is Battlefield 5 after this, but I think this machine will struggle quite a bit. Now I've got it on medium quality settings, and we're getting on average, I'd say 40 frames per second, which is fine. But if you want to up that a bit, probably lower the quality down a touch. But I think 40 frames per second, it's a good balance. So I probably won't try Battlefield 5, but if you're into Battlefield 1 or earlier, this machine is quite happy running that. It even nudges nearly 50 frames per second. Okay, so that's Battlefield 1. Right, this is a game in the Need for Speed game series. It's called Need for Speed Payback, and on low graphical quality settings we get in nudging, I'd say, oops, going a bit off-road, nudging 30 frames per second. This cutscene. So during gameplay, you're getting 30 frames per second, which for a driving game, that's fine. This is a relatively recent game. So I think if you nudge the resolution down, you probably get more frames per second. So I've got it on the highest resolution but the lowest graphical quality settings, and this is nudging nearly 30 frames per second. So yeah, I suppose if I took that resolution down, I'd probably get 35 to 40 frames per second. Right, so that's Need for Speed Payback. So just to finish off then, if you want a cheap desktop computer, this is ideal once you've cleaned it out and applied a few upgrades like extra RAM, solid state drive, a bigger hard drive, and the all-important graphics card. And as I said in one of the videos, it did surprise me, the performance of that, because it's only got 1 gig of VRAM, but it does very well in some of the more popular games. Right, thanks for watching.